Bible study this evening is 2 Samuel chapter 18. 2 Samuel chapter 18. We've been going through the book of 2 Samuel, and chapter 18 is where we have the battle between Absalom and David. So Absalom, of course, is David's son who took over the kingdom from him. And there are a couple of little points that I want to point out in this chapter. It's an interesting chapter. You can also go pretty deep into this chapter if you wanted to. But we're going to take a look. So David is getting ready to fight against Absalom because Absalom has come after David. And David, of course, is on the other side of the Jordan River right now. So in 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1, the Bible reads, "And David numbered the people that were with him, and set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. And David sent forth a third part of the people under the hand of Joab, and a third part under the hand of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and a third part under the hand of Ittai the Gittite. And the king said unto the people, I will surely go forth with you myself also. But the people answered, Thou shalt not go forth, for if we flee away, they will not care for us, neither if half of us die will they care for us. But now thou art worth 10,000 of us. Therefore now it is better that thou succor us out of the city. And the king said unto them, What seemeth you best I will do. And the king stood by the gate side, and all the people came out by hundreds and by thousands. And the king commanded Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, Deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave all the captains charge concerning Absalom." So David divides his company into three groups. And he says, and look, we're going to go out against Absalom. So Abishai's in charge of a third of the army, Joab's in charge of a third, and Ittai is in charge of a third. And then David says, and I also want to go out there. But the people say, that's not a good idea, David, because you are you're the king. You're the main guy. And they don't care. They won't care about slaying us. They're going to want to go after you, and they're going to want to kill you. So instead of us worrying about you out there in the battle with us, we would rather you stay here in the city and help us. They were at a city, and David was able to procure a lot of the necessary army things that they needed, probably weapons, food, clothing, etc. And so they said, you stay here, and that will be the best way that you can help us. Plus, David is by now middle-aged or no doubt a little bit past. So he may be a little bit old for going to battle, and they don't want him out there kind of getting in the way or something like that. So David says, okay, if this is what you want me to do, then I will stay here. But, he said, and he commanded his three leaders, Joab, Abishai, and Ittai. He said, when you get Absalom, deal gently with him. What does that mean? That means I would, prefer you not kill him, but rather keep him alive. He said, because, he is my son. So this is what he commanded them to do. When they get to Absalom, let's not be, slaughtering him and everything. Let's treat him gently. And all of the people heard that commandment. This is good. Okay, this is important for the chapter. All of the people heard what David commanded his three generals. So there is a policy here set by the king. Verse 6. So the people went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was in the wood of Ephraim. So the battle was in these very, very thick woods. Okay, the wood of Ephraim. And very thick and very hard to get through. Verse 7, where the people of Israel were slain before the servants of David, and there was a great slaughter that day of 20,000 men. For the battle was there scattered over the face of all the country, and the wood devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. So, they're in a pretty thick wood and thick brush and all that stuff. And according to the Bible, there were 20,000 of the men of Israel killed. These are Absalom's men. 20,000 are killed. And the narrator of this book says, in fact, there were probably more killed by the woods than there were by David's swords because of, just how rough the terrain was and everything. Verse 9, and Absalom met the servants of David. And Absalom rode upon a mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great oak, and his head caught hold of the oak, and he was taken up between the heaven and the earth, and the mule that was under him went away. Now, this is a little bit humorous. So the battle's going bad for Absalom. So he's probably going out to meet the servants of David to try to come up with a truce, to probably surrender. And we know that David has told Joab and Ittai and Abishai, deal gently with Absalom. Of course, Absalom doesn't know this, but Absalom's like, I'm going to have to go out and meet them, and we're going to have to try to come up with some kind of a truce or something. So as he's going through these woods, he's riding on a mule, probably because a horse will not fit. Because it sounds like it's pretty tangled up stuff. So he's riding on a mule, and the Bible has told us earlier that Absalom was a handsome, good-looking guy. He had this great hair, and he only cut it once a year. So his hair was probably pretty long, probably well taken care of. Well, his hair is what gets him into trouble because his hair gets caught in branches in this oak tree. And so he gets hung in this tree. And the mule keeps going. So now he's hanging in this tree by his hair. It's kind of symbolic, I think. The thing that makes him, kind of vain. Hey, look at how long and pretty my hair is. That's what's gotten him into trouble. He's stuck. And he is stuck by his hair. Sometimes I've thought about this because, a lot of people, a lot of guys wear long hair. Well, be careful about your long hair. I've seen football players wear long hair, for example. And they've got this hair hanging out of their helmet. And it is not against the rules of football to grab someone by their hair and tackle them. So most running backs or people that are going to get tackled, you'll see them have short hair because they don't want people to grab their hair. That's why they think it looks great. It can be more trouble than it's worth. And so that's the thing with Absalom. He thinks his hair looks great, but it winds up causing him, to get stuck. So verse 10, and a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, behold, I saw Absalom hanged in an oak. So there's a guy that happens to see of David's group that happens to see Absalom swinging by his hair. So he goes and tells Joab, he says, hey, I saw Absalom. He's stuck in a tree by his hair. Verse 11, and Joab said unto the man that told him, and behold, thou sawest him, and why dost thou not smite him there to the ground? And I would have given thee 10 shekels of silver and a girdle. And the man said unto Joab, though I should receive 1,000 shekels of silver in mine hand, yet would I not put forth mine hand against the king's son, for in our hearing the king charged thee and Abishai and Ittai, saying, beware that none touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise I should have wrought falsehood against mine own life. For there is no matter hid from the king, and thou thyself wouldest have set thyself against me. Then said Joab, I may not tarry thus with thee. And he took 3 darts in his hand, and thrust them through the heart of Absalom, while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. And 10 young men that bare Joab's armor compassed about, and smote Absalom, and slew him. This is a very good, interesting piece of this chapter that we should take to heart. This man who found Absalom caught in the tree by his hair, who is not named, is the best example for us in this chapter. And he's not named. We don't even know who he is. But I can tell you, this guy is smart. This guy is very wise, and a lot of people today could learn a lesson from this guy. So here's what happened in sort of plain English as we break this down. This guy goes and sees that Absalom is stuck in the tree. He goes and tells Joab. This is what he should do, is go and tell Joab, because Joab is the leader of the army. Joab has never been known to be a merciful person. Joab has also been known to be conniving. We saw it when he sent the woman to David. So we can see that Joab has a reputation. Joab is a political leader who is under David. Joab tells this guy, he says, you saw Absalom stuck in a tree? Why didn't you kill him? If you had killed him, I would have given you a reward. The guy tells Joab, he says, I don't think so, Joab. He says, I heard, just like everybody else, David tell you and Ittai and Abishai not to kill Absalom. I heard that. That's the policy that was set. He said, so you could have given me, he said, hey, I'd give you 10 shekels. He said, you couldn't give me 10,000 shekels of silver to kill Absalom because of the rule that was set. And he said, and anyways, Joab, see, here's the smart part. And anyways, Joab, if I had killed this guy, Absalom, David is going to find out about it. And so here's a big point that this guy is making that is very important for us. If you do something and there are witnesses to it, it is going to come out. It's not going to, you can't keep it a secret. This guy knows if he kills Absalom, as long as Joab knows that he's killed Absalom, David will find out. No doubt. Look, if you tell someone something, or if you do someone and someone sees it, it will not be a secret. Moses learned this, right? Moses killed an Egyptian because of the fact that the Egyptian was hurting an Israelite. Moses thinks nobody saw it. The next day, he goes to the very next day to two other Israelites and tries to break up their fight. And they say, what, are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian? He said, well, surely this thing is known. Well, of course this thing is known because people gossip. That's what they do. For example, there are some members of my family, I won't necessarily name names, but if I want to spread news to my entire family about something, there's one or two people that I have to tell. And that's it. I don't have to say a word to anybody else. Everybody else will know that news by the next day. Yeah. So this is the way it is. And so, we have to understand this, okay? If you plan to take somebody into your confidence for something, do it carefully, because chances are suddenly it's going to get out there everywhere. It's just the way it is. This guy understands that. So this guy tells Joab, if I had killed Absalom, David will find out about it. Now here's the next wise thing that this guy says. He says, and I can't count on you to back me up. In other words, what he's saying is, when David finds out about it, Joab will cover his own rear end and throw this guy under the bus. That's what this guy is saying. And he is exactly right. You're not going to be able, because people in power like to seduce you, And that's why I say this guy's sticking to the policy. You go to work, okay, this is the best example I thought of here. You go to work, and the highest boss, maybe 3 or 4 levels above you, says, this is the policy. You cannot do this, whatever it may be. Then your boss says, hey, we need to break that rule for this reason. But the higher up boss said we can't break that rule. You go ahead and break the rule following your boss. The thing becomes known to the higher up boss. And the two people whose heads are on the plate for this is you and your boss. You think your boss is going to take up for you? No. Even the best bosses, when it comes to their job or your job, they will say, sorry, it was all his fault. And they will throw you under the bus. Now, God won't do that. That's what's great about Jesus. He is always there. He will never leave us or forsake us or anything like that. But you better know that if you make a mistake, even if your boss told you to do it and somebody higher up finds out about it, your boss will leave you and forsake you. Just like that. That's what this guy understands. He's like, because Joab said, man, if you'd have killed him, I'd have given you 10 shekels of silver and a girdle. This guy's saying, no, you wouldn't have. He's saying, David would have found out about it. He would have asked you who did it, and you would have pointed right to me. It's exactly right. This guy understands human nature. So many humans do not understand this lesson, but we need to be aware of this. Look, what's the moral of this story? Don't trust anybody. It doesn't mean, now, and in all seriousness, I say that, don't trust anybody. That is different from suspecting everybody. Okay? But, just because somebody says, oh, go ahead and do that bad thing and I'll have your back. Look, I don't care if it's me telling you to steal $100 out of the treasury of this church to do something. No, that is not the policy of this church. So, you tell me to go pound sand. Because if the auditors come from, the government or whatever and say, hey, where does $100 go? I'm going to say, I don't know. Check with, the treasurer. I might put this on YouTube, so I'm not mentioning any names. I say, I don't know, check with whoever, so, and just kind of push it off on them. That's the way people do it. So follow what is right above what is commanded. And you can tell the difference. This guy knew the difference between what was right and what his direct boss told him to do. The Bible tells us to always obey the higher power. The Bible says we ought to obey God rather than men. But we ought to obey men if it doesn't conflict with God. But if it does conflict with God, we don't obey men. Okay? And it's the same thing in every level of our lives. No matter what we choose to believe, every one of us has more than one boss. God, government, your direct boss. There are, when you start to think about all the people who control your life and who tell you what to do and who give you orders, there's hundreds of people between you and God. And for the most part, we obey those hundreds of people until what they say conflicts with what God tells us. So anyways, this guy's he's pretty sharp. He does not fall for this. He leaves here without 10 shekels of silver, but he does have his own life, which is more important, because if he had killed Absalom, David would have killed him. He knows it. He wasn't born yesterday. So notice verse 14. Then said Joab, I may not tarry thus with thee. So Joab's like, I don't have time for this conversation. Because he knows the guy's right. So he's like, I'm not going to mess with you anymore. So then Joab took 3 darts in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. And 10 young men that bare Joab's armor compassed about and smote Absalom and slew him. So, once Joab strikes the first blow, then his armor bearers like, well, now the guy's, it's too late for the guy anyway. So they help Joab kill him then. Verse 16, and Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing after Israel. For Joab held back the people. So after Absalom is dead, there is no reason to continue killing their own people in this civil war. So Joab calls David's men back. And they took Absalom and cast him into a great pit in the wood and laid a very great heap of stones upon him. And all Israel fled, everyone to his tent. So they didn't even give, Absalom a burial. They didn't drag him around from country to country like, Queen Elizabeth has been done now. I've thought about maybe preaching a sermon on that Sunday, about how we handle death. Nothing against, the Queen. And for all I know, she might have been a Christian. I know she did have seemed to have a pretty strong faith. But why are we dragging her carcass around for 3 weeks before we stick her in the ground? As a country guy would say. But anyways, so Absalom didn't even get that. He just gets thrown in a pit and rocks thrown over him. Verse 18. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and reared up for himself a pillar, which is in the king's dale. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the pillar after his own name, and it is called unto this day Absalom's place. So Absalom's life is really kind of sad. He doesn't even have an heir, to take his place or anything like that. The next part is kind of interesting too, I think. Verse 19. Then said Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. Now Zadok is the current priest in Judah. Okay, he is one of David's allies. So Ahimaaz is one of those as well. Then said Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, let me now run and bear the king tidings, how that the Lord hath avenged him of his enemies. And Joab said unto him, thou shalt not bear tidings this day, but thou shalt bear tidings another day. But this day thou shalt bear no tidings, because the king's son is dead. So, Ahimaaz is, the king likes him, Joab likes him. And so he wants to go and give David the news of the victory. Joab says no, because David's not going to take the news very well because his son is dead. So I don't want you going and taking the news to David. Verse 21, then said Joab to Cushai, go tell the king what thou hast seen. So he said, let me get some other guy to get the news to David. And Cushai bowed himself unto Joab and ran. So Cushai is the messenger. He's the email to David or whatever, but of course they didn't have any, there was no other way to get David the message other than sending someone. And so he's running, instead of using a horse or anything, because they're in these thick woods. I mean, Absalom got tangled up riding a mule. So, he's going to run and deliver by foot this message to David. Verse 22, then said Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, yet again to Joab, but howsoever let me, I pray thee, also run after Cushai. And Joab said, wherefore wilt thou run, my son, seeing that thou hast no tidings ready? But howsoever, said he, let me run. And he said unto him, run. Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and overran Cushai. So in this story, Ahimaaz really wants to give the news to David of the victory. Joab does not want him to give the news to David. He sends Cushai. Ahimaaz says, well, let me run anyways. Joab says, but you don't have any news to give him. He says, but I want to run. So Joab says, well, go ahead and run, thinking that Cushai will get there first. Verse 24, and David sat between the two gates, and the watchman went up to the roof over the gate unto the wall, and lifted up his eyes, and looked, and behold, a man running alone. And the watchman cried and told the king, and the king said, if he be alone, there is tidings in his mouth. And he came apace and drew near. And the watchman saw another man running, and the watchman called unto the porter, and said, behold, another man running alone. And the king said, he also bringeth tidings. And the watchman said, methinketh the running of the foremost is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. And the king said, he is a good man, and cometh with good tidings. And Ahimaaz called and said unto the king, all is well. And he fell down to the earth upon his face before the king and said, Blessed be the Lord thy God, which hath delivered up the men that lifted up their hand against my lord the king. And the king said, Is the young man Absalom safe? And Ahimaaz answered, When Joab sent the king's servant and me thy servant, I saw a great tumult, but I knew not what it was. This is a lie. Ahimaaz knew that Absalom was dead, but he chose not to give that negative message to David. He just wanted to be the bearer of good news, just the bearer of the positive. But in order to do that, he had to lie. Verse 30. And the king said unto him, Turn aside and stand here. And he turned aside and stood still. And behold, Cushai came, and Cushai said, Tidings, my lord the king, for the Lord hath avenged thee this day of all them that rose up against thee. And the king said unto Cushai, Is the young man Absalom safe? And Cushai answered, The enemies of my lord the king, and all that rise against thee, to do thee hurt, be as that young man is. Basically, Cushai tells him, no, Absalom is dead. And the king was much moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, thus he said, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, I would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son. It's an interesting story, and I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about it here. When we think about tidings in the Bible, one of the verses that comes to mind is, glad tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city, a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. The gospel is a translation of good tidings. So tidings is a message. And, Ahimaaz wanted to deliver a good message to David, but he wanted to deliver the message for his own gain, because he's a guy that likes to deliver good news and be celebrated for it, congratulated. There are people out there in the world like this. For example, Joel Osteen likes to deliver good news because he likes to be complimented. Oh, he's such a great speaker. Oh, he just moves me. Oh, he's just great. He's wonderful. Look at all these people that are listening to this good news. But in order to deliver that good news, he must lie. And he does lie. This is just the way it is. I've seen interviews with him back when Larry King was alive. Larry King had him trying his best to avoid the questions that he was asking, and finally say, I just can't be the judge, and he would backtrack. He is extremely, wants to downplay, abhorrent behavior like homosexuality and things like that. I'm just here to give you the good news, because that is what will get him popularity and money. That's Ahimaaz right here. I just want to deliver the good news. Okay? The guy that is less popular is the guy that will deliver the true news. That's Cushai. Cushai comes and he says, look, everything is well, David. The victory is won. But what about Absalom? Oh, I'm sorry, he's dead. So this is not the news that David wanted, but it was the news that he was seeking, and it was the news that he got. We need preachers who will bring those kinds of tidings to the congregation. You do not need for me to tell you every single week how great you are and how God wants to do wonderful things for you and how you can have your best life now. No, there are weeks when you need for me to tell you that gossip is bad, that adultery is bad, that you're lazy, You're not lazy, but so I preached a sermon recently, right, on laziness and that kind of thing. Sometimes you need the true news. You need to hear what's hard to hear. I believe most of the people in this church, if not all, want to hear the truth, even if it is a little bit hard to hear, because that we want to know. Is what I'm doing right? Is what I'm doing wrong? Am I doing something bad? We need to know what the Bible says about everything. But we have a lot of Ahmazes out there in Christianity that just want to preach John 3:16, which is probably the greatest verse in the Bible. But you don't need it every Sunday. Once every little while is good. You need more about, hey, these are the bad things that you're doing that you need to stop doing. So, we need the truth, not just the good news with the lies mixed in. And so that's what I can get out of this story right here, because that's what's going on here. Ahimaaz wants to tell David that the victory is won, but he doesn't want to give David the bad news. He just says, oh, well, I don't know what happened to Absalom. There was some big fuss, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't tell you there. Like a Joel Osteen. Hey, do you think homosexuality is a sin? Well, there's a big to-do about that, but I don't know. I just can't judge it. I can't tell you there. It's the same thing. And then we have Cushai that says, well, yeah, actually, your son, who is a wicked, evil person, because he wanted to do the king harm, he is dead. He phrased it in a great way, I think, Cushai did. So, but he gave David the truth of the matter. And that's what a person who brings tidings is supposed to do. Give accurate tidings. So that's what I get out of this. So next